On this episode of Arts Weekly, I'm speaking with Jason Markzon and Sam Savage from the IPFW Department of Music.
During his time with that group, he has helped to bring back or to revive xylophone rag playing. He improvises on the xylophone like no one I've ever seen. In addition, Bob is also a master tabla player and African drummer and snare drummer and just all-around percussionist.
I started off to be a veterinarian, believe it or not, at Virginia Tech. And let's just put it this way, freshman chemistry changed my life. And so I had to choose other venues for my professional fulfillment.
This is Arts Weekly.
Arts Weekly is a production of the College of Visual and Performing Arts at IPFW, offering degrees in fine arts, music, theater, and visual communication and design. IPFW, the energy of arts.
Hi, I'm Chuck O'Connor, and you're watching Arts Weekly. Joining me is Jason Markzon from the IPFW Department of Music. Good to have you on the show for the first time, Jason.
Thanks for having me.
We're going to talk a little bit about the percussion ensemble here at IPFW, which you're heading up this year. But first, let's talk a little bit about you. You're the principal percussionist for the Fort Wayne Philharmonic. Tell us a little bit about how long you've been at the Philharmonic and what you do there.
Well, this is my 4th season with the Philharmonic. And as a principal percussionist, in addition to performing, one of my major roles is assigning all the parts to our section members and any extra players that we have come in. But another part is getting all the instruments together. Sometimes we have unusual instruments. We have a performance coming up, we had a performance in the past, actually, that called for it was a piece by Michael Doherty, and we needed a metal sheet struck with chains. So we had to put that together, and we also needed what's called a Mahler box or a Mahler hammer. So we had to build a box that's struck so that had a large booming sound. So that's always interesting. Sometimes we need really, really large bass chimes that can be 8-10 feet long. So percussion instruments, there's the normal instruments like the xylophones and the cymbals, but a lot of times we have unique instruments.
Yeah, indeed. You have the bells, and you have, one time I was there at the Philharmonic one night, you had this big kind of rotating, it almost looked like a lottery drum. I don't know what that was, but it was pretty funny, and it made a funny sound.
That's the wind machine.
That's the wind machine? Okay. Yeah. So you do that as well. Where did you get your training?
I went to University of Michigan. That was for my undergrad, and after that I ended up in Philadelphia at Temple University. I studied with a retired associate principal percussionist of the Philadelphia Orchestra, Alan Abel. And so after school, I spent 4 more years in Philadelphia. And,
yeah. Now, what made you become a percussionist? It's more than just being a drummer. It's a lot of things.
It is. The drums are what attracted me to percussion. As a kid in 4th grade, when we had to pick an instrument to play in the band, it was the drums that I liked. But before I started in band, I played piano. And when I was learning how to play piano, I learned how to read music. And that kind of gave me a little another skill in percussion. I was always playing the xylophone and the bell parts, because when you normally start percussion in band, you start with just the drums. And from there, it just kind of expanded. I got interested in marimba, and then there's the timpani. And eventually you have to learn how to play all of the instruments.
You have to play all of them. I always wondered, you talk about reading music, and of course I go to the concert, and all the musicians are playing the violin, they all have the music in front of them. What kind of music does the percussion section have? Because a lot of those instruments don't have notes. They're just beats. Is it the same kind of music, or are there special notations that one has if you're a percussionist?
Well, for the melodic instruments like xylophone, marimba, the notes look just the same as any other instrument. And for single-pitched instruments, snare drum, the notes are all on one line on the staff, but there might be a technique, maybe snare drum like a rim shot, that the note head might look like an X. Or if we have to play a setup that has multiple instruments, we call those multiple percussion setups. So there's no standard notation. So for a piece like that, we need to learn a new map for that piece.
That's interesting, because some of those rhythms are very, very complicated, and you have those little flourishes at the end. It seems like it'll be very, very hard to write that down. It's so quick, but perhaps I guess there's a system. So this year at IPFW, you're actually filling in for Eric Schweikert, who also plays with the Philharmonic. He's on leave right now, playing with the Detroit Philharmonic, correct?
Yes.
And so you're teaching for us. How do you find teaching?
I love teaching. Playing in an orchestra and teaching at a college is what I've always wanted to do. Mm-hmm. And the schedule is pretty busy, but teaching students at the college level kind of sharpens my own skills. Mm-hmm. A lot of times when I'm practicing myself and I think I'm having a little difficulty with something, I take a step back and I ask myself, what would I tell my student to do now?
Oh, that's good.
That's usually the answer.
I think most teachers will tell you that you learn a lot just by trying to explain what you know to somebody else, and it kind of clarifies one's own thinking, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, absolutely.
So you mentioned this a little bit before, but there's a wide repertoire of instruments that a percussionist needs to master, correct? What are they? You mentioned the xylophones, and what are some of the other ones?
In the school, in the program that we have here, we have the instruments divided up into mallet instruments, xylophones and marimba. Also, you have bells and chimes. We have snare drum technique and timpani. Mm-hmm. There's also drum set. And then the world of percussion branches out into what we call world percussion, and that would include African drumming, Indian tabla drumming, Javanese gamelan. Every culture has their history of percussion. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we had Bolakata Kande on the show a few months ago from West Africa. I know that he came in and worked with your students as well.
Yeah, that was a fantastic opportunity.
Yeah, to learn that style of drumming. Well, talking about a drummer, or rather a percussionist, coming to IPFW will be Bob Becker, performing actually April 5th here at the Reinhardt Music Center. One of the most outstanding, probably the preeminent percussionist in the country right now, Bob Becker. Tell us about this concert that's coming up.
Well, Bob Becker is a co-founder of the Nexus percussion group. They formed in the 70s, and during his time with that group, he has helped to bring back or to revive xylophone rag playing. He improvises on the xylophone like no one I've ever seen. In addition, Bob is also a master tabla player and African drummer and snare drummer and just all-around percussionist. And we're performing a lot of his compositions. He's performing his pieces with our students as Bob will be the soloist. He's performing on snare drum, and also he's doing some xylophone rags. In addition, we're forming an ensemble made up of Eric Schweikert, myself, and two percussionists from the Dayton Philharmonic, Jerry Noble and Jeff Luft, and we're joining with Bob, and we're performing some more of Bob's compositions.
Wow.
And the great thing is that all of his music is a different style. So it's all percussion instruments, but the way the instruments are orchestrated and the style of the music, it's all going to be different.
Wow, you can really learn a lot about the world just listening to the way different parts of the world play the drums and beats. True?
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So now, is Bob? He's also going to teach students. He's going to do a workshop as well.
Yes. The day before, the 3rd,
Right, yeah,
4th.
I think 4th.
I'm sorry,
4th. Yeah.
April 4th. He is doing a clinic on snare drumming, which will be open to anyone who wants to come. And he has a unique approach to snare drumming, where he approaches the instrument in a melodic way, which might seem unusual because the snare drum is not always considered a melodic instrument. So this is a very special event.
And so, is it open to people besides IPFW students? Can other students come?
Yes, they are encouraged.
They
to
are
come.
encouraged, especially if you're a
Absolutely.
high school student that you might be interested in percussion. And
Especially. Mhm.
come on down. Where's that going to be?
That will be at in the Reinhardt Music Center,
Yeah.
room 120, and it's at 7 o'clock
7 o'clock in the evening.
in the evening.
Wow.
Yes.
Really, I can't stress enough that this guy is just a world-class, perhaps the most well-known percussionist in the world, if not in the country, if not the world.
Someone described him to me today, actually, as the Yo-Yo Ma of percussion.
Indeed. I mean, how did we land him? I guess is my question. I mean, what a wonderful opportunity.
Jerry Noble, one of the musicians that will be performing with us, is a colleague of myself and Eric. Jerry comes in and plays with us with the Philharmonic from time to time. Jerry teaches at Wright State in Ohio, and he organized this whole event. Jerry is bringing Bob into Wright State, and then the whole week Bob Becker is going to be in the Midwest, and we were lucky enough to be able to schedule him to come out here as well.
Okay, that's going to be April 5th over in the Hour Performance Hall, Reinhardt Music Center here at IPFW. Quite the musical event for this season. Jason Markzon, thanks for coming on Arts Weekly. It's good to have you.
Thanks so much.
For more information about the IPFW Department of Music, visit ipfw.edu/music. To buy tickets for the Percussion Ensemble, call the Larson Ticket Office at 481-6555. Arts Weekly will return in a moment.